right, well, I'm going to ask you to do a little activity with me, okay? Since I'm the last speaker of the day. So, would you please stand if you celebrate hardship, adversity, and grief in your life? Would you please stand if you look forward to suffering, loss, and trauma? Now, how about if I asked you, how many of you know that at some point in your life, you will face hardship, adversity, grief, and loss? Thank you. That's right. We will all face this at some point in our lives. Thank you. You can take your seat. Now, what if I told you that your experience with hardship and adversity will shape your future? And what if I told you that just by changing your perception of hardship and adversity and grief, you could become a superhero? That's me at 2 years old. I'm the daughter of immigrants. My parents immigrated to Canada from Bhopal, India in the 1970s. Both my parents were told they could never have any children. My mother suffered countless miscarriages, and then miraculously, I was born. I was the center of my parents' universe. They doted on me all the time. We did not have a lot of money. We actually struggled a great deal financially. But what my parents gave me was an unending form of the purest and most unconditional love. When I was growing up, my father had a lot of health issues. He had ulcers, and when I was in high school, they metastasized into cancer. But he never told us this. My mother and I had no idea that the doctors had given my dad less than a year to live. When I was in my first semester of college, my father became very sick. I mean, painfully sick. I remember taking him to the hospital, scared and confused, waiting for the doctors to do their tests. What the doctors then told us is that my dad had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It had spread throughout his liver, and he had only a few days left to live. He would not be discharged from the hospital, and he would not be coming home with us. The next day, my father slipped into a coma, and several days later, he passed away. At 19 years, this was the greatest hardship I had ever faced. The pain of losing someone you love runs so deep. It's a physical ache that you can feel in your bones, and it hurts. But this was not the end of the hardship that my mother and I would experience. My mother, soon after, slipped into a deep and crushing depression. Our bills started piling up. Then our furnace, our heating system, broke down in the dead of a Canadian winter. And our roof started leaking from the weight of all of the snow. You get the picture. We were facing one difficulty after another. We had no income now. Both my parents did not have steady jobs. So I had to drop out of college and find work. While working 4 part-time jobs and caring for my sick mother, I felt anxious and stressed. This was hardship. I was struggling. It felt like every time I came up for air, there was a heavy weight that would push me back down. And it was hard. The truth is, none of us escape life without facing adversity. Suffering is part of the human condition. Experiences, especially the difficult ones, will test us to our limits and can push us to our breaking points. But I'm here to tell you today that grief, suffering, adversity, and loss are not your enemy. They are a mental and emotional training that will make you stronger and bring out the greatness in each and every one of you. Here's the logic. We all have to face adversity in life. It's inevitable. You will be tested in your education, your careers, your marriage, your children, your health, or financially. Yet how you react to these experiences is everything. You could forever change the course of your future just by changing your view of adversity and hardship. I didn't know this then, but I know it now. And together, today, we're going to learn how to prevail. According to the Holmes Rahe Stress Scale, these are the top 10 most traumatic events that individuals experience in a lifetime. Now, none of these should surprise you, except maybe number 7 and 9. Number 7 and 9 surprised me because I thought marriage, love, getting back together after a breakup, these are all supposed to be happy events, right? But they can be very stressful. Or, as a fellow Indian, I think they were just referring to Indian marriages and reconciliations. According to similar research, you will find that social media and media overload makes the top of anxiety lists. Now I'm going to ask you for your feedback again, and the key here is honesty. So please raise your hand if after posting a picture, you check continuously to see how many likes your picture received. Please raise your hand if you are deeply offended, if you find out that somebody has unfriended you or is no longer following you. Yeah, this is how most of us feel. And that's why social media can be such a source of anxiety, especially in today's digital world. Now, what they need to add to this list, in my opinion, is free Wi-Fi. Because no free Wi-Fi can be very stressful indeed. So here's what the research tells us about adversity and hardship. There are generally two types of reactions in individuals. The first reaction is people go into a victim state. This is where the individual feels overrun and overwhelmed by the adversity that they're experiencing. And they become almost a prisoner to their present circumstance. The second type of reaction is to fight the adversity, rise above the circumstance, and to move beyond. Suffering forces some individuals to reevaluate and reestablish their position in their lives. They develop a new threshold, a stronger barrier. They develop grit. Later on in life, when I was reflecting upon my own experiences, I became curious. I became curious about the science behind grief and adversity. I thought to myself, if this is such a critical element of being a human being, then there has to be some theories or explanations behind it. Plus, I wanted to make sure that when adversity hit me again, I would be able to fight the adversity, rise above the situation, and come out ahead. Allow me to introduce you to the competitive side of my personality. So what does the science tell us about the two reactions? The individual that goes into the victim state and the individual that fights the adversity and moves beyond. I came across a fascinating phenomenon called post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth searches beyond resilience. It actually looks for the growth that occurs in an individual after a major life crisis. The scientists that study this tell us that there are two critical factors that must occur in order for post-traumatic growth to take place. The first essential factor is that you have to imagine your new possibilities. Imagining your new possibilities is what translates into the action that you take. An example of this would be to leave an abusive relationship. You have to actually envision yourself getting out of the relationship and rebuilding your life in order to actually do something about it. Envisioning your new possibilities turns your grief into action. This step is all about channeling your courage. The next essential element is to connect with others. As human beings, we are not wired to suffer alone. The tragedy or trauma or adversity that you are experiencing actually creates a chemical reaction in your brain that moves you to connect with those who care most about you. You reach out to family and friends. You lighten your load with them. They share their burdens with you. This also reduces any negative self-talk. We've all been there, that voice in your head that creates self-doubt and feelings of helplessness. Connecting with others is that form of necessary self-therapy that helps you move beyond. These factors amaze me. Essentially, these individuals have taken the hardship that they experience and turned the adversity into a kind of fuel that propels them forward in life by envisioning themselves beyond their present situation and connecting with others. I imagine it like this. We all have a superhero inside of us. And the trauma drives the energy to bring out the greatness and that inner superhero in each of you. Trauma drives change, and that can be powerful. The truth is that we can take our challenges and find new meaning and transformation. You all want to be the most successful at whatever it is you want to accomplish. From this point forward, as you continue on this journey of life, if you take the adversity you experience and make it your armor, make it your challenge to bring out the greatness within you. I'm not asking you to celebrate hardship, but if you look at some of the world's greatest leaders, you will find that their paths were not easy. People like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, and Mother Teresa, of course. All of these people were so diligent in their pursuits in the face of overwhelming adversity. They chose to take the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. Viktor Frankl, renowned psychologist and someone who has suffered enormously in his own life, so eloquently stated, "Do not look at your inner turmoil, but turn your gaze to what waits for you. What counts is not what lurks in the depths, but what waits for you in the future, waits to be actualized by you." In summary, grief, adversity, hardship, and loss will hit you at some point in your life, and maybe in multiple ways, and it's never easy. But the good news is, you can take this talk, and you can take the grief, channel your courage, and turn it into action. And then you can ask yourself the question, which will I be, the victim or the superhero. Thank you.